Hello guys, hello everyone. I hope you can hear me and see me and see the slides. Thank you for joining me today. I'm happy you're here. And today we will talk about webinar funnel, not like a tricky and trendy marketing tip that you can use just for one launch, but we will talk about webinar funnel as a system. And my approach is to build a system behind the scene, to pay attention to every stage of the funnel, to every important block of the funnel. And sometimes people say that to me that webinar doesn't work today, and people tired of webinars. And I think it's not like this. It's only because those people who want for their projects a webinar funnel, they don't pay attention to very important core elements of the funnel. So we will talk about it today. First of all, I will tell you something about for what project webinar funnel is mostly effective, and is webinar funnel effective for your project. We will talk about the core elements, the core criteria, and some additional criteria. Also, I will present you my framework that I use for the clients and for my projects. And actually, today's webinar will be built by the same framework. And it's pretty simple and clear. However, it has some elements that will be, I hope, you will get some insights from this framework. Also, I will talk about the team behind the scene and what roles are important for the webinar, and what roles can be combined and mixed. And I will talk about how I, with my services, can help to your team, to your project. And also I will answer your question during the Q&A session. And you may pay attention to this tab in our chat in the app. I already have some questions from you that I asked to ask before this webinar, and I will answer those questions. And also feel free to ask me anything in this exactly tab. But also you can use chat, and I will take a look, and I will be monitoring the chat and answer according the situation. And maybe it will be right moment in the slides to comment something in the chat. Okay, let me introduce myself. My name is Elzhene. I'm from Russia, and now I'm located in Georgia. And this year, I hope I will be moving to Germany. That's why we meeting in the European time zone. I want to get used to it beforehand, in advance. And I work as a webinar specialist and mostly the webinar producer for more than 5 years. I work for EdTech project. I worked for HR Tech consulting projects. And my role was more like a manager role. I coordinated the teams. I made strategy. I analyzed all numbers behind the webinar funnel. I determined the core messages of the funnel, or maybe messages of the presentation of the slides. And I prepared speakers, subject matter experts. And I had a small team and coordinated this multifunctional team. And it was pretty effective part of the whole marketing, because every month, consistently, we have 20% of revenue just by the webinar funnel. And also since 2025, I work as an independent freelancer, and I develop my skills not only as a manager and strategist, marketing strategist, but also as hands-on marketing operation specialist. And I do everything for the webinar funnel, especially if your project is not so big and you don't have resources to pay the whole team. So I make copy, I make design of the landing pages and for the slides of presentation and email templates, and I coordinate all the webhooks between elements of technical stack. So I am a jack of all trades. Of course, I'm using, I'm doing this with the help of AI tools, especially Claude Code and Cursor, etc. ChatGPT, of course, etc., etc. So it really helps to do everything the more fast than ever, I would say. And also I want to emphasize that I have a great experience as a psychologist, because 20 years of my life I spent as a therapist and in private practice. And every time I approach to the building of the funnel, of marketing funnel, I look at it not only as a marketer, but also as a psychologist. And I see through every stage of the funnel what kind of behavior, what kind of motivations affect the people's decision. That's why I consider myself very effective member of your team. Today, I will not speak a lot of my packages of services. I just show you my free webinar funnel audit, and feel free to click the button. Let me open up for you this little green button. Probably you see it in the chat. You may click it and submit a request for my free funnel audit, webinar funnel audit. And also you can scan QR code on the slide, and it will lead you also to submission our free meetup. I will walk you through the whole stages of the funnel, and maybe we will talk about if you only considering the webinar funnel as your marketing tool, you may ask all your questions, and I will advise you some technical stack, some approaches, some content parts in the structure of presentation, etc., etc. So feel free to click all this green button or scan the QR code. Okay, we get acquainted with me, and now let's get acquainted with you. And you have this little poll in your chat, and I ask you to submit the poll. And this is the only question: your project type. Let me get acquainted with you relating the project type, because now we will talk about what kind of companies are most effective with webinar funnels. So let me see the results of the poll, and I see that we have tech representatives of EdTech, we see consulting, and we see HR tech. Okay, great. And if you have the answer of other, I would ask you to answer in the chat, because it would be interesting. Sometimes consulting can be very broad industry. Yeah, consulting could be business consulting, career consulting, financial consulting, etc., etc. And it really built as a good way to promote it by webinar funnels. And only one criteria that we should think when we start in the webinar funnel as a marketing tool is only one criteria of considering here in the slide, is the average deal size. Average deal size should be at least $1,000. I recommend you to start from this price. You can have different product line and different packages of services. However, in average, it would be something about 1,000. It should be high ticket. That's why webinar is so effective for this kind of products, because directly, even through the social media content, it's really hard to sell something around $1,000. But if you have not so high ticket product, I would not say that 1,000 is so big amount, but it's like a starting point. But if it's less, so your unit economics will not meet up, because you need some marketing budget. But to build a webinar funnel, it's not only about the marketing budget, it's about resources of the team. It's very time consuming, because you need at least 1 month before building one event. So a lot of activities you should make before you host an event. So if the price is worth it, you may consider for your project webinar funnel. And also there is also criteria that you can consider. And first of all, we perceive webinars as an education first format. When we hear the word webinar, we can relate to the education. And it sounds like seminar from university, and it was started from the education, and it continues to be education first format. And that means that when you have complex product, not obvious, when you need to educate your customer how to use it, how to make the decision and to choose the right decision between your packages, for example, between your product line on the shelf, webinar could be the great help in it. And also when your project have, for example, B2B product can be like this, when you have a really big, long decision-making cycle and involve multiple stakeholders, and one person think this and another person think that, and webinar could be as a starting point of your negotiation process, because it's a really good and soft and delicate way to build the trust between you and your prospects, and after that your customers. So if you feel like your project has these criteria, probably webinar funnel is for you. And also if you see that you fail and your numbers doesn't improve from one month to another when you try to sell directly, maybe it's time for you to build funnels, because funnel is really good and maybe not so fast, but really soft and delicate way to build the trust between you and your customer. And now let me present you my framework that I use when I work with my clients. And every brick of this wall, every step of this way is really, really important. And I will explain you every bit of it. And there is no list, there is no less important thing. Everything should be considered, and everything should be taken seriously. So first of all is webinar value definition. What is it? It's kind of marketing 101. It's pretty generic questions that you should ask yourself about your product, about your content, about your customers, etc. However, when I talk with my clients, I see that a lot of people just skip this thing, this step, and does not determine all the simple things. For example, who is this webinar for? So when you talk with me, when we start our negotiation process, and for example, you want to hire me as a webinar strategist, I will ask you, the first question will be, who is this webinar for? Because from this, we will jump to every part of the content, every emphasis of the slides or of the landing page. So ask yourself, who is this webinar for? And of course, it should be your target audience, and should be target audience of your products. And if you know what is it, if you know what pains do they perceive, if you know what results they want to get after working with you and your products, and probably you know what question do they ask themselves, what emotions do they perceive, etc., etc. So you should understand your client properly, and you should ask yourself about your target audience. The second question when you determine the value of the webinar is meaningful takeaway that justifies their time. Yeah, probably it's not a big time, 60 minutes, it's not so much. But nowadays, people's attention is very expensive, because we have a lot of different information. And if people want to consume the time 60 minutes of their life for your webinar. It should be something really valuable, and subconsciously, subjectively, people should consider this very valuable for themselves. And of course, it relates to educational part of the webinar, but not only this, because sometimes people expect from the webinar not only education, not some ideas, not some knowledge, but also they expect attention, engagement, and maybe a little bit entertainment, because they want to spend their time comfortably to get to know something. So these should be your question that you ask yourself about your future webinar. And also the third part of this step is, what are we selling? And not only your product line, not only your packages of services of or online courses or consultations, etc., but also what would be the call to action of your webinar? What would be the next step that your customer, that your prospect should take after the webinar? For example, for me today is not sell something for you. For me today is to get you to submit the request on the free consultation, to free audit. And a lot of people use the same call to action in their webinars, and it's really soft way to get people to the next step. So those are the questions that you should ask yourself and answer. And probably it will be the basics from which you will build, for example, a landing page, registration page of the webinar, because you will know this, who will be the speaker, what will be the agenda of the webinar, the meaningful takeaway, what will be the date, what will be the name, the title of the webinar, and what will be the offer. And it's already good base for you to build something else. Okay, the next stage, the next brick of our framework is funnel success metrics. And you probably know, when we talk about marketing, we should know what are our goals. And our goals not only something what makes us happy, for example, money, but also it should be exact numbers, exact analytics. And we could chop our big target to little parts, to little bites. And we can take all our efforts to get this little target, and after that to get the big goal. And I will show you the most important metrics. Maybe you will add something else. Maybe you plan your marketing part. Your marketing department has some KPIs that you want to meet every month, for example. So you can align webinar funnel to your common things. But I will talk only about funnel metrics. And first of all, of course, when we speak about a funnel, we speak about the stages of the funnel. What will be the bottleneck? What will be the most wide part of the funnel? And when people move from one layer to another layer, we call it conversion. And we need to improve every conversion that are available for the funnel. I suggest you to consider 4 conversion rate. Conversion of the registration page from traffic to registrants, conversion of the live webinar room from registrants to participants, or you may call it visitors, conversion from visitors to applications, and sometimes I call it the most important conversion of the funnel, of webinar funnel, because it depends of the delivery, of the presentation, of how you build the whole part of the live webinar. And also the 4th metric is conversion from applications to payments. And there are some benchmarks. For example, I can provide you for EdTech market, for HR tech market, but they are pretty common. And when you have your own legacy metrics, and you can align them, you can forecast them to the next event. It make your life easier. So pay attention to conversions. Second part is, of course, the closest to money. And the first thing when you think about effectiveness of marketing tools, you think about revenue, of course. And total revenue generated from webinar, and also average order value. Because if you are selling during the webinar some pages, and you have the most expensive, the middle one, and some basic tariff, you may sell only the most cheap, but it could be bad for the business. So when you plan something, you plan not only your revenue, but you plan number of payments, and you plan average order value. And when you analyze the results of the hosting webinars, you may also pay attention how many payments were made for the basic tariff or for the most expensive tariff, and what could be the goal for the next event. And also, the very important part is a marketing efficiency metrics. And I'm talking about ROMI. And of course, you probably know that ROMI should be more than 100%. But when we talk about webinar funnel, I would plan for the ROMI at least 400%. So in 4 times better, your revenue should be than your marketing budget. Why is that? Because, as I already mentioned, that we spend not only marketing budget, we spend a lot of time, we spend capacity of the team, and it's really resourceful taking marketing tool. So you should consider that it would be effective for you and will bring you real results. So when you plan your marketing funnel, and it will be my webinar performance report template that I can give you during our session, during our free audit, and I remind you to click the green button and book a free audit. Let me refresh this button and publish it right away. So yes, I will give you this template, and I will show you how to make a forecast of webinar funnel, considering all the metrics. Usually the starting point of the planning should be budget you have, the number of registrations you want to get, and I advise to get at least 100 registrations. So if you are able to get 100, or it's better to 200 registrations on a small budget, for example, using only organic channels, or maybe the channels from paid advertising would be not so expensive, and you have this budget, it will be good. Less, I don't advise you to. It's just wasting your time and money and energy, because you need to get the conclusions, you need to get analytics, and you may build your analytics only in, I wouldn't say big numbers, but pretty good numbers, at least 100 registrations. Okay, let's talk about technical stack. It's also sometimes a very painful part of building the funnel, because there are a lot of tools nowadays, a lot of platforms, a lot of solutions, and everyone say that they are the best, etc., etc. And what is the core question you should ask yourself? Is the journey seamless for the customer and fully visible to me? So you have 2 parts of this block. What is the seamless journey? Consider a webinar funnel as a simple customer journey map, and every part of this journey should be comfortable. For example, a person see creative of the ad, meta ad. They like it, they catch attention and click to this advertisement and go to the landing page. Landing page should be consistent, should include the same branding, colors, logo, fonts, maybe, so people like see the second time something about your business and about your product. And then they see your invitation to the webinar, and it's very comfortable. It's nothing is logging, nothing is bugging, and they can fill the form. It's very quick for them, and they see the feedback as a thank you page, for example. And let me show you the whole way. They see the thank you page, and it's simple and quick for them, and they get the feedback from email stories. So it's the second element. First element is landing page. Second element is email service as a tool of communication with the customer. And they get some warming up messages, then some reminders, the links to the webinar room, and the very important information before the webinar. And also after the webinar, they get special offer, they get replay if you want to get replay, and they get a last call. That's what I advise to use as a part of communication. And also the fourth element of the technical stack is CRM. And usually I advise to get followers, registrants of the webinar in one service, and leads, qualified leads that will be meet with sales team in the CRM service. Because usually CRM service such as HubSpot, they are pretty expensive to keep. Of course, they have also email service built in it, but it's pretty expensive for you. So I advise you to spread this between the elements of technical stack. So what kind of tools I advise for registration landing page? I advise pretty simple decisions: Tilda, Framer, WordPress, and plugins of WordPress, Elementor. So some proven tools that existing as a website builders. Sometimes webinar platforms also have kind of constructors of the landing pages, but their possibilities, their options are very limited. So I advise to keep it separately. Email service provided, it's easier. It's something that you maybe already have. MailChimp, Customer.io, SendPulse, ActiveCampaign. What is more? Klaviyo, Brevo, etc., etc. There are a lot of MailerLite. There are a lot of tools nowadays. So the only thing that I suggest that this service should have is trigger automation, because first of all, we need to get the confirmation of the registration. So it should be triggered by some kind of event. And also there's simple mailing list. Some of these services has chatbots, and you may you may build the flow of messages, but it's optional. So it's not so important as a trigger event. Also, you should have webinar platform. And as for me, it was the biggest challenge to find some webinar platform that has analytical part of the registrants, because every time we have registrants from the landing page, of course, we have the emails, maybe even phone numbers, maybe something else. But when people go to the broadcasting room, we don't see them. We maybe see the total number of participants during the whole live session, but what we need is at least their emails. And when you need emails, that means that you need like second registration, so something like a little window before entering the broadcasting room. And some people don't like it, some platforms don't provide it. So I stopped with the webinar gem, but maybe sometimes I will vibe code something else, something like some solution for this kind of funnels. And also CRM system. For the webinar funnel, all you need is only good slots, the slot place to choose the slot with the sales manager. So it could be the cheapest tariff of a CRM system, such as HubSpot, Airtable, and something else, something like this. But what is important, not only seamless experience of the customer, but also analytics that we track on every stage, because all I explain you now is a part of the funnel: landing, thank you page, email service, etc., etc. So it's also the stages of the funnel, and we need to track conversion, as I told you before. And to track the conversion, you need to make integrations, and sometimes it's pretty hard to make integration between landing page and email service or webinar platform and CRM system. So you can use webhooks, Zapier, and Make, and there are a lot of solutions, not only them. Okay, this is about technical stuff, but what we should think about, I already mentioned it, it's communication. In this scheme, you can see communication before webinar, and I would spread it like communication as a nurturing, warming up the people who were registered, and something like reminders, something triggered by the event itself. So don't forget, you have webinar today, and here's the link to the broadcasting room. And also post-webinar communication, because based on my experience, we have a lot of, maybe not the same number of leads, but 10% of the whole conversion rate from registrants to applications will be from your CRM, so from your email service. So pay attention to this. And what you should answer for the core questions: how do you guide people from registration to decision through communication? Because from this communication, people see what is the type of the project, what is the product, who are the speakers, what are the clients, maybe customer case studies, and it could be included, for example, to nurture emails. And follow-ups could include something like deadlines, some scarcity things that you already used during the webinar, but you can emphasize them included to emails. And I already mentioned confirmation email. It's very important, but it's only like a feedback to your customer that everything is okay. But a lot of improvement you can get through the emails and chatbot, for example, communication. If you have not so effective conversion from registrants to attendee rate, you may use something else, something like SMS and pushes and mobile pushes and chatbot reminders, etc. It's only thing to get people to go to the webinar. But don't forget that it's not only attendee rate, because only from emails you can get some leads. Okay, registration acquisition channels. How we promote our event. And we use two big parts of promotion channels. We use organic traffic, such as SMM, Instagram. I don't know, you have maybe some followers in LinkedIn account or Facebook, or maybe you have YouTube channel. So everything that could be organic, that already knows you, and when you mention that you hosting the webinar, they will register, and you count it as an organic traffic. Of course, they have better conversions, and I would not recommend to cannibalize those traffic, because you use organic channels for direct sales. Let's be honest. The whole reason why you conduct all the content calendars and you generate a lot of content it's only for this to get direct sales from it. But sometimes it's good to get the invitations and to get some registrants for your live event. But also that what can scale your business is paid channels, such as all kinds of meta advertisement, targeting, etc. And also don't forget about influencers and partner promotions, because they have big effect for the registrations nowadays. And people, especially young generation, trust the most to influencers. So paid channels make their function. They help you to scale your project, and they help you to grow your base, to grow your email list, and not only for the one webinar. And you expect results not only from one webinar, but then after that you will use it as your CRM, and you will develop it for maybe the next funnel, maybe not webinar funnel, maybe you will think of something else, but at least you will have this base that you can work with. And also the important thing that you should consider when you use advertising, and not only advertising, but invitation in organic channels, that you should track all the traffic. And every single link that you bring in Instagram, in Facebook, etc., should be formed, should be generated with this little tail of UTM. Because when you have the sources, you may consider what channel was effective. And for example, to operate with the marketing budget for the next event, maybe to make some correction with the budget. So don't forget to track, to mark every single link. And all those what we have before, it was before launch. So this is the launch. This is exactly what we're doing when we want to invite people to our webinar, is a launch. And only after the launch, when you keep monitoring how many registrants, what kind of registrants, maybe you collect some information, not only emails and names, maybe you collect information about their professional parts, their phone numbers, etc. And you may conclude that these people from this country, according to phone numbers, etc. And only after that, you go back to the content of the webinar. So you may meet with your speaker, with your subject matter, and you may build something really great that will be meaningful for the participants of the webinar. And when you design in your presentation, and I want to emphasize this again, that webinar is the education first format. And first of all, you need to maybe take from the head of your subject matter expert the great insights, the great ideas that people will take away from your webinar. And you may use a different structure of presentation. You may put, for example, selling part in the middle of the webinar. Or you may speak about your special offer only in the end of the webinar. It doesn't matter. You may test and align something that will be good for your project and for your product. But education first is very important. And then I already told you that people go to the webinar not only for knowledge itself, not only for information, but also for some emotions, for some engagements, for some entertainment. That's why almost every webinar platform nowadays has these engagement activities such as polls, or you may link the video and show, for example, a review of your customer about the product, and you can link some files, some templates, etc. So feel free to use it, and it will be really great. And of course, don't forget about webinar offer. So it should be some kind of balance between education part and selling part. And it's also considering for the next step of our framework about the speaker, but I will take here a little bit, because you need to formulate. You need to formulate your call to action. You need to include in your presentation the good description of your product, of the whole benefits that people get from your product, the whole insights and the pains that you will cover, and all about. Don't be shy to talk about your product, because people already have a trust, because they had this education first content and they have this engagement, and they during the whole webinar you already build the trust. So it's really a great opportunity to talk about your product more and more, and explain how the process you keep with the clients, and what the bonuses, what the limits, etc. It should be considered as a separate part, and as a marketers we should think about these slides in the content of the presentation. And at least, but the last but not the least, speaker preparation, because sometimes speakers are the same as the subject matter experts, and they are great expert in their subject. For example, if we have EdTech project, they are teachers, and they can speak, they can prepare themselves on the slides of education first content, but they have lack of skills as a sellers, as a salesman, because they don't have this need to develop such skills. But our purpose is to teach our speaker to sell. Sometimes my clients ask me, maybe we should take two hosts of the webinar, and one host will be the subject matter expert and the second would be the salesman, and maybe it's better. Sometimes it could be, I don't mind, but actually my recommendation for you is to use only one host during the webinar. Why is that? Because everyone has their own pace, their own rhythm, their own accent, their own energy, charisma, etc. And during the whole webinar, people get used to it. And some people focus only on one person, and they want to pay attention only on one person. That's why I don't recommend to use two hosts. Maybe for housekeeping questions, like a moderator, etc., etc. But the main host should be the one. And what should we prepare with the speaker? Of course, public speaking skills, but usually our speakers know how to make a public speech. It's not a big deal for them. Technical dry run. It's also can be like very uncommon for the speaker, and we need this only technical rehearsal during the platform. How to use these engagement activities, how to switch off, turn off the video, audio, how to make slides, etc., etc. So it's also a big part. And the most important thing, to rehearse the sales block, because usually it's the skill that you need to improve by the speaker. Okay, and guys, we don't have much time for me to answer your questions, but I will talk a little bit about the team that you will need for your project. So that, as I already told, that one person can wear a lot of hats and be a webinar producer, marketing, automation, operation, subject matter expert, designer, copywriter, traffic manager. As for me, as I provide my services, I can be webinar producer and put all the strategy part, of the coordination part, of the preparation of speaker, all the marketing automation operations, a designer, copywriter. I don't do paid traffic. So when you work with me, it's better to consider someone else for the paid advertisement, such as Facebook setup, etc., etc. And also, usually I'm not the subject matter expert, and I cannot be the speaker of your webinar. So consider maybe yourself or maybe the best expert from your team who would be the speaker. And I will provide the preparation of the speech, of the slides. So it will be a good collaboration for us. Answer one question. What is the biggest challenge with the webinars for you today? Just me to consider what's the main pain. Attracting the right audience, turning attendees into leads or sales, setting up the tech stack and tracking, structuring content and offers. We haven't tried webinars yet. And I see that a lot of people haven't tried webinars yet. I feel free to submit the request with me, and we will talk about your project and is it proper decision for you to make webinar funnel. Setting up the tech stack, let's talk about these things. Submit the request and click the green button and maybe scan the QR code and book a free audit to review your current setup.